Welcome to Social Venture Partners Dallas in our series on responds. This session is significant in the sense that it is very timely, but also it is affecting so many of our fellow citizens here locally in Dallas and across the nation. As with most social problems, we understand that they are very complex and there are many systems involved. Philanthropy is involved, government is involved, individuals are involved, business is involved. Today, we have a representation from each of those, and so we welcome you to this session. Social Venture Partners Dallas is an organization of engaged men and women who bring their talents and their financial resources to the growth and capacity of organizations that are working on the front lines. We encourage you to share your talents with us and with the community, and we certainly encourage you to be generous in support of our work as we keep these efforts open to the public and free. Your sponsorships and your contributions help to make that possible. So please join our work at Social Venture Partners Dallas. Today, we are grateful to our ongoing sponsors, Something Good Consulting and the law firm of Wright Knatzer for their generous support of these events. Today, I want to acknowledge and welcome Jennifer Owen, who is a local attorney here in Dallas, an expert in this field of representing issues around housing and rental issues. Jennifer is a member of Social Venture Partners Dallas. In fact, is our former board chair here and a major contributing partner to the work that we do in the city. Not only are we grateful for Jennifer's work in the city, but for the work that she does across the nation. So Jennifer, welcome. Thank you for all that you did to pull this session together and for your expertise in formatting it and for the questions that you helped facilitate. Next, we would like to welcome Council Member Casey Thomas. Council Member Thomas, amongst great things in his career here, represents District 3. But specific to this conversation, he serves as the Vice Chair for Housing and Homeless Solutions on that committee. We are grateful for him carving out some time. We know that the council member may have to leave to get to a committee meeting, but we are grateful for any time that he can spend. And Council Member Thomas, thank you for your service to the city and for the work that you are doing on behalf of this important issue here in our city.
Thanks for having me this morning.
You're welcome. We are also extremely grateful to Lucy Billingsley, who is a partner in the Billingsley real estate company. Lucy, we are so grateful for your contributions that you have made through business and philanthropy to the community. You bring a multi-generational perspective to this work, and from your father to your own generation to your children being involved in the real estate work in the community. So we are grateful for that perspective and all the wisdom that you bring to share with us today. Thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure. I feel like I'm multi-generational, all packed into one.
Thank you so much. We are also welcoming Mary Ann Daniello, who is an attorney with the Legal Aid of Northwest Texas, obviously working on the front lines to represent renters and folks in need. And we are so grateful to you for the good work that your organization does and for the dedication that you bring to that every day. So we look forward to hearing your perspective as well. Thank you for joining us. I am also very pleased to welcome Ashley Brundage, who is the Senior VP of Community Impact for the United Way of Metropolitan Dallas. Ashley serves on a number of advisory boards and boards for housing initiatives in Dallas. She just also happens to be a member of the best United Way in the country. And we are so grateful always to the leadership of Jennifer Sampson and Susan Hoff for all the good that they do in our community. This is an extraordinary panel, and so we're going to get right to it. I'm going to ask Jennifer to just, obviously, when we're talking about housing in our community, it is a very broad, many-faceted issue, but we're going to look at one narrow slice of it, and I'm going to ask Jennifer Owen to kind of frame that issue for us as we go forward.
Thank you, Tony. There were serious concerns about the rental housing market prior to the pandemic. Two primary causes were that rent increased faster than wages and the demand for affordable housing units exceeded supply. So to put some numbers to give us a sense of the scale of the problem, 36% of renting households in the US, that's 44 million renters, have an annual median income of $41,000. And looking at the lowest end of that scale, 73% of the poorest renter households are severely housing cost burdened. And that means that they are spending more than half of their income on housing, which means there's little left over for food and other basic necessities. Severely housing cost burdened renters are more than twice as likely to fall behind on their rent and be threatened with eviction than those that are not cost burdened. And the pandemic only exacerbated these problems. So more recently, a survey of Texas renters revealed that 40% of renters were unsure of their ability to pay August rent. In Dallas, almost $14 million in a program for rental and mortgage assistance was closed in 26 hours after receiving more than 25,000 applications. The program could only serve 1,000 families. And a few years ago, when the city of Dallas developed its new housing policy, it identified a need for an additional 20,000 units of affordable housing in the city.
Thank you, Jennifer. And Mary Ann, while those numbers are startling and staggering, we know that behind those numbers are real faces and real people, our neighbors that live in our community. Tell us a little bit about the CARES Act, what you are seeing, and how we should understand what's happened as a result of that and what's happened now that it's expired.
Well, the CARES Act initially put a moratorium for the landlords that were covered by the CARES Act, which were not all landlords. They were anywhere from 30 to 45% of landlords nationwide were covered by the CARES Act. And these were landlords that had federally backed mortgages, were tax credit units or tax credit funding, public housing, Section 8 vouchers. Those landlords were covered by the CARES Act, and there was a moratorium from March 27th through July 25th on evictions for those covered landlords. While that moratorium has expired, there are still some CARES Act protections for tenants. For the CARES Act covered landlords, they do have to give under the CARES Act a 30-day notice to vacate, which in Texas we're used to either a 24-hour or a 3-day notice to vacate. So there's a longer notice to vacate if it's for non-payment of rent. And these are for non-payment of rent cases. Also, with regard to the CARES Act, for multifamily landlords that are covered under the CARES Act that are in forbearance, they are prohibited, if their loan is in forbearance, from evicting a tenant for non-payment of rent during that time frame through December 31st of this year. So there are still some protections, but the moratorium on evictions under the CARES Act has ended. So we are seeing that those and we anticipate a significant increase in evictions towards the end of the month, the end of August, the beginning of September as a result.
Thank you, Mary Ann. Tell us a little bit about the actual work of your agency.
Well, Legal Aid of Northwest Texas helps with civil legal services to low-income Texans. We assist in housing and representation of renters and landlord-tenant actions. But in addition to that, we assist in a variety of civil legal services. In Dallas, we have 2 divisions, a family law division, which is self-explanatory, and then the division that I'm in, which is called our Housing Consumer Protection and Economic Benefits Division. And then in that division, in addition to housing, we also do consumer protection. We have a tax attorney, a bankruptcy attorney, and then economic benefits are your public benefits, disability, Medicaid, food stamps. And so those are the services that we provide to low-income Texans in Dallas and throughout Northwest Texas. We cover about 114 counties and currently have 26 offices. at that.
That's great work that you're doing, and thank you for doing it. Councilmember Thomas, we understand that this issue is multifaceted in the sense that there are federal laws, there are state laws, and then there's the city. What protections in the city do renters have today? I understand that Ken Paxton has some issues with perhaps how the cities are managing this. Can you talk to us a little bit about your understanding of what the cities can do and what the city of Dallas is doing?
Sure. Well, first, thank you for having me this morning to be a part of this important conversation. One of the things we did shortly after we had our first cases of COVID was the mayor created 2 task forces, ad hoc committees on COVID relief. One committee was economic recovery, one was social recovery. He appointed me chair of the economic recovery, and we began to look at what we could do, what type of ordinance we could put in place. And we passed an ordinance that in place that put protections in for renters. If anyone potentially, and this is as long as there's a declaration of disaster declared, and we're still under declaration of disaster, that anyone who's at risk of eviction as a result of losing their income due to COVID-19, they have 60 days to where they can come up with a actual plan for payment plan or work out some other plan between them and the management company of the apartment complex that they're in. In light of the fact that, if I'm not incorrect, Friday at midnight, the eviction protections that were in place federally expired. Fortunately, we have this in place because this gives time for so many of those who are tenants who have been impacted by COVID-19 to work with their management company, the manager of the apartments, and work out some type of strategy, some type of plan to where they can look at some form of reimbursement.
Thank you, sir. Ashley, talk to us a little bit about how philanthropy is partnering with the city to help alleviate some of these issues here for our residents.
Hi, yeah, sure. Thanks for having me, by the way. I'm glad to be here. So the city had $10 million that they released through RFAs from a CDBG grant, from the Department of Housing and Neighborhood Services, and then from the Office of Community Care. They've awarded about $4.8 million of that to United Way for our Dallas Rental Assistance Collaborative. So we're very grateful to them for that. One of the reasons why they are doing this is because the nonprofits that we can partner with through our collaborative, which we have about 17 in our group, is we're able to serve the people that the city can't reach. So we're getting out there into neighborhoods of concentrated poverty. We're reaching undocumented populations that the city is unable to serve, and really going deep into the community so that we can get this rental assistance out to the folks who need it the most. There's some other funding sources too that have been made available through Dallas, Denton, and Collin counties and the surrounding cities. And for those that are interested, there's a really exhaustive list of those assistance sources on the Apartment Association of Greater Dallas's website. So I know that there are several nonprofits across the community that have accessed those resources as well to help. Unfortunately, I would say I want to add that these dollars just aren't enough. We need a whole lot more out there in the community. I know that HUD and the state have other dollars to allocate, but it just hasn't gotten down local to the local level yet. But we're working on it.
Thank you. Councilmember Thomas, do you feel like, I know that there are the city is going through budget review right now. There are great constraints on the budget given the COVID crisis and the lack of revenue coming into the city. But do you feel like the city is really making this housing issue a priority?
Oh, absolutely. One of the things that we're literally discussing now is ways to provide more funding for housing in particular, as well as other social services, other social programs, and looking at the concept of reimagining public safety. There are funds that have gone into public safety in general. And we're looking at being more efficient. There's not a better time than now, as we're looking at efficiency all across the board, to look at ways in which we could identify areas where the city can put more funding into, and housing is critically important. As long as it's one person who doesn't have a place to stay, who wants a place to stay, then we still have work to do. And so that is definitely one of our top priorities at the city of Dallas.
We certainly appreciate the great work that the city is doing, and we understand for taxpayer purposes that efficiency of spending dollars, taxpayer dollars, is very important. We also understand that effectiveness is critical, right? Because effectiveness in the front often saves a lot of money on the other side. And so we appreciate any attention that you give to the effectiveness of solutions that really do help in the long run. Lucy, I'm going to turn this to you, ask you to, you are extraordinarily plugged in, very well versed on the owner of multifamily resident side. What's the perspective? How is it affecting the owners of these multifamily units?
It's great to be here. So thank you for letting me participate. And you've got two groups of owners. You've got, the large, multifamily developers, commercial groups, and then you've got the mom and pops. The mom and pops have about 40% of the nation's 48 million rental units. So the impact on the mom and pops is instant, it's hard, and it ripples right through their own personal economic wherewithal. My experience, though, is with the developers and the larger groups. And for us, everything has changed. Our own properties are not in the affordable, but let me just speak to the industry at large, because the impacts are across the board. But for us, instantly, when we were all shut down, we had about 3%, not horrific, but it turns out to be real dollars. 3% of people came to us and said, we need out. And so we accommodated those people. Then we had others that said, we want to stay and we need to have help in payment plans. So we accommodated those. So as our residents go, so go we. Landlord's almost a bad word, but when you're one, it's really, where's your heart? What do you care about? And we care about many things. Communities, the quality of what we create, a place that enhances someone's lives. There are a lot of values we have. And one of them is we care about the residents. In personal ways. So we've had to go reinvent ourselves. We have had to learn how to market online totally. We've learned how to give tours without being there. Our costs have gone up because everyone's at home all the time. Our services have gone up because everyone's at home all the time. And our property taxes have gone up steadily over the past 10 years. It's the single largest expense item we have. So our margins are shrinking. Our revenues are obviously slowing because not as many people are coming to take tours. And so our occupancies are shrinking a bit. And the financial pressure is certainly there. We're giving bonuses to people to renew, and we're keeping rates flat. Those are just all the economics that are going on. So it's socially a big deal. How do we keep the morale of our residents up when they're stuck in their homes and they didn't, they're not designed to be a place where they're living and working. They've got their own intimidations, their own fears, and maybe someone's sick. So it's a community, and though we're not a government, we don't have those responsibilities. We certainly have responsibilities to our fellow citizens and those who've chosen to live with us.
Lucy, you bring up a good point about the landlord can sometimes or oftentimes be seen as the bad guy, right? And we also understand, as you point out, that a lot of those landlords are just mom and pops themselves. But even the large companies that are landlords, they're employing lots of people, and those folks are on the front lines, and they're needing to support their own families. And so the ramifications on both sides are quite extensive. I want to stay with you, Lucy, for one more second. As the thinking of it from the business side and the developer side, do you see that the pandemic and this issue is changing the thinking of the developers in any way to be more socially conscious, or is that just the margins not significant enough to make it worth their while?
It is totally changing the way developers think. In many aspects. Some developers came out instantly with how do we contribute to our residents in need. So you have some thrusts like that with just contributions. It's you know what the way we succeed is when our residents succeed. We're in this together, and so we have to pay attention to the financial rules. That's something we have to have for survival. But it's really much more than that. And the way we design spaces for the future, that can change. The disinfectant, the cleanliness, our standards of operations. One of the impacts of all this is that we really learn to appreciate and respect each other a lot more. Because, as you know, when we're running around running our businesses, we're not talking about these issues in the good times. We're talking about how we care about our residents and how we want to enhance their lives, but not with this depth, not with this seriousness. So this is a weighty moment, and the weightiness of it really contributes to how we, not just how we feel, but how we act. So I think it's a big ramification.
I appreciate that. I certainly appreciate the way you framed that as a weighty issue. Councilmember Thomas, for years it has been a weighty issue around the affordable housing and affordable housing communities. What would you say is there any shift? Is there more emphasis on building affordable housing? Is there anything that the city is doing in particular to change policies to make those kinds of things, offering free land, et cetera, or for mortgages? What's the city's initiatives around this issue?
Well, one of the first things we did was establish a comprehensive housing policy. I think that was a good first step that incorporated strategies and ideas and plans to focus on affordable housing. We're looking at what we've done, and we're also open for any ideas anyone has. We need to understand that the affordable housing challenge, I'm not going to call it a crisis, anything, I'm going to call it a challenge, is a regional issue. It's not a city issue. If it's not addressed from a regional standpoint, then we're not going to see the progress that we need to accomplish. It's a North Texas region, must all be at the table, must all be on the same page, must all be in support of workforce housing is something that's a more accepted, I believe, term than affordable housing, because affordable has a certain perception. And so having a regional conversation about what workplace housing looks like, how we can create opportunities for everyone, the affirmatively further and fair housing, to make sure that that's reinstated, and that the importance of that is done, that we don't allow people's political agendas to determine how we provide housing for people, and allow everyone have opportunity to live anywhere that they can afford to live.
I appreciate the nuance from affordable housing to workforce housing. Jennifer, do you want to add any comments to anything that the panel has talked about so far?
Yes, Tony. I think the challenge is before the pandemic, we had a pretty thriving economy here in Dallas, population growth, job growth, and that meant that more of a certain type of product was being built. Cost of land is expensive, cost of construction is expensive. So it was hard to find the right mix that would allow a developer to come in and say, I will build an affordable housing community. Yeah, I can make that make economic sense. I can make debt service. And so what I would like to hear maybe from Lucy or from Chair Thomas is how can we close that gap? What incentives can we provide to create more workforce housing units here in the region in a way that makes economic sense?
I'll jump in and tell you what my problems are, and then we can talk about what are solutions. On some of our properties, I mentioned our property taxes are our biggest expense. 47% of our expenses, of all of it, salaries, utilities, painting, make-ready repairs, 47% of everything is property taxes. So, you know, that is important for people who are trying to do something affordable. If I'm at an area and I want to build mixed use or mixed levels, I want affordable incomes living with people who are, you know, regular incomes. How do I do it? Well, if you're going to take 20% and say, okay, 20% of these are going to get a discount, you know what that did? If I have to make a margin, whatever it is, that means that 80% actually picks up the benefit to the 20. And so you have to design with that in mind. So if you wanted to have something really fancy, you really can't go there. And so that's one economic awareness. Another one is, I totally agree with Councilman Thomas. This is regional, but now if we're out in the burbs, and I've actually built this product, I built affordable, 20% affordable out near the airport. Well, I'm in the city of Dallas. I'm held to the city of Dallas economic standards, salary standards, but I'm in an area that doesn't have those. So now I've got to go find the people to bring them in to help achieve the goal. And if I had a friend who was in South Dallas and he had built affordable, but then the rules set in place that he couldn't do it anymore because of all the lawsuits. It's for people who would like to engage and do right, we have a hard time doing it. Because all the legal guidelines are so tough. And then I sat down with legal counsel at the city and said, well, what if I did it this way? What if I did it this way? What if I did it this way? I just got shut down and shut down and shut down. I understand there's got to be guidelines, but I couldn't figure out how to get around to continue trying to build affordable. So I quit trying. So Casey, come save me. Give me the answer. I'll go on mute. I'm past this baton.
No, I wish I could. I think we have to, you know, this is a good first conversation. I think our housing task force was a great idea that was included in the comprehensive housing policy. It brings everybody, allows everyone to come around the table and give input on what they feel is an effective strategy for housing and all forms of housing across the board, single family, multifamily, you know, affordable workforce housing, and being able to establish priorities, present. You know, I think one of the things that one of the most important things the task force can do is take all of these ideas and suggestions, because there are things that we've amended the housing policy to include, and prioritize those and have our housing director, David Nagura, to present this prioritized list to the Housing and Homeless Solutions council committee for us to consider and us to look at, and for us to say, okay, out of this list, what are some things that, since it's already been prioritized, what would it take in order to get it done? One of the first steps is knowing how many, affordable or workforce housing units that we need. And that's something that we've charged staff with to give us a number. And I know they're working on that. And once we have that number, then we can look at different forms of housing, multifamily housing, mixed income, single family, and then we can more effectively address this housing shortage that we have here in the city of Dallas.
So one thing we can do, just to jump in real quickly, if you all at the city ever say, I'd like to see what the operational impact is if we had this mix, this, whatever the mixes are, we can run models and just show you, here's how much we think it costs, and here's what it looks like the income would be, and let you sit inside our shoes, and then say, how can we help? How can we be constructive? So call on us if you need us to run any of that.
I think that's a great idea. I will share that with our chair, Councilmember Chad West and David Nagara.
Jennifer, any response to that conversation, what you heard there?
I think that was a good start to addressing the issue of easing the regulatory burden. Anytime developers have conflicting requirements in the same region, or anytime they have delays in going through approval and permitting and meeting requirements, that costs money, and money means that you're going to develop fewer affordable housing units. I think the thing that maybe we haven't addressed, which is because it is such a systemic issue, is how do we close that funding gap? I think Lucy touched on, we have to look at what a mix of conventional and affordable units do to the revenue stream and how we operate the property, but just can you make that make sense? And who comes in to supply that funding gap? Does nonprofit have a role? Do social impact investors have a role? And in all of that, obviously now with the pandemic, I'm concerned that structure was not working well. So what happens now? Property taxes are 55% of the city's total revenues. Commercial property taxes are expected to take a hit in 2021. Projected $25 million decrease in sales tax revenue. So I would love to hear maybe from Chair Thomas, does the city have any ideas about how to address the financing gap, and how will these efforts be impacted by the revenue challenges of COVID?
Ironically, we're having that conversation right now and in terms of how we're utilizing some of the CARES Act dollars as relates to housing, relates to just challenges with the budget. Our CFO is literally speaking right now and explaining how that's being done. And so I will go back and watch the tape and get more insight into that. But I think we have to, look at, the challenges that we're dealing with. And one of the first slides of the city manager's presentation today during the budget workshop, it was a slide from the Fed chair where he said, everyone has not been impacted by this pandemic equally. People who are already, challenged are the ones who are already suffering, are the ones who are most impacted by it now. And so trying to be as proactive, I know it's hard to say proactive when you're responding to something that happened, but being able to look down the road and see potentially how many people are going to be impacted and are already being impacted by this, and what strategies it relates to trying to keep people in their house, so we don't add to our homeless population. Unfortunately, you're going to have people who are going to, be homeless and it's going to be a different type of situation that we probably have never even looked at when we look at how to address the homeless population, different forms of the homeless population, individuals who, you know, are at a loss because they've lost income and other things as a result of a, you know, pandemic. You know, you can't call this a natural disaster. It's a pandemic. And, you know, until there's a focus on, you know, public health across the board as it relates to economics, it relates to everything else. Public health must be the number one priority. We must listen to the public health professionals as we make decisions that are going to impact the lives of millions of people.
Ashley, I'd like you to respond to the question that Jennifer posed around how can impact investors, how can philanthropy fill in some of these gaps? What are you seeing? Any new initiatives there? What is the recommendation from philanthropy to this problem?
Yeah, I would say a couple of things just in response to what's been said too is I think that nonprofits and individuals can help around advocating for the systemic changes and the policy changes that need to happen across things like the zoning issues that we're talking about to build affordable housing, even just changing the policy around accessory dwelling units to allow that to be an opt-out versus an opt-in policy so that individual households have the option to build an accessory dwelling unit if they want, and it's not based on the neighborhood that they're in so much. I think too, investors, social impact investors, private investors, if we can pull resources through an affordable housing one similar to what United Way is launching, that helps fill a lot of these gaps that we're talking about for developers. We can fund innovative responses to help increase the affordable housing units that are out on the market right now. We can fund pilot projects to help bring new affordable units online, and we can help incentivize landlords to help keep those units at an affordable level. So helping fill that gap that Lucy was referring to, if we can all pull resources in a fund like that, that will help respond to a lot of these issues that we're seeing. It's important to remember that for our region to thrive, housing exists on a continuum. So we need housing that is for homeless folks, and we need housing for those that can afford the top of the line. And your nonprofits and social impact investors can come along on that lower end and help fill some of those funding gaps that are needed there. I would add too, just another innovative practice to help, especially right now, is that we need to trust our neighbors and give them cash. Give them cash transfers. Let them decide where they need to make some payments so that they can stay housed, or that they can pay for childcare, or they can pay whatever bill is looming over their head right now. We're making a lot of decisions for our community by saying, here's rental assistance, here's rental assistance, all you need is rental assistance. But there are some good programs that are making headway in Austin, San Antonio, and El Paso that if we could scale more broadly here in Dallas, can provide a lot of stability for our families right now in COVID. I think too, nonprofits and philanthropy could help around educating around NIMBYism. You know, there are a lot of people out there who want to build affordable housing in different neighborhoods if they find some land or a complex that they can rehab. But there are a lot of negative stereotypes around who are the people that are going to move into affordable housing. And so to help educate around the need for affordable housing, then that it's not as bad as it sounds is important. You know, our teachers, our police officers, folks like that need affordable housing. It's not drug users that are on the street, and that's not what all typical homeless people are either. So it's important to help educate the community around that as well.
And I appreciate Councilmember Thomas making that distinction, because this is our workforce. Everybody that you described is our workforce, and the housing is just simply not available for our workforce. Marianne, you're dealing with folks who are the closest in closest proximity to this. What are you learning? Is there any low-hanging fruit that if we implemented just X, Y, and Z, their lives might become easier and they might be able to get along much better?
Well, I don't think there's a panacea. There isn't one solution there. Rental assistance is important, but as Ashley said, there are other, they also need childcare. They also need assistance paying the utility bill and keeping that on, and keeping the water on, the electricity, and doing that. And one of the biggest impacts we've seen, and this is to Ashley's comment, in that they're not all the drug users. And in the past 4 months, one of the things we have seen is we have clients today who in February and January would not have been eligible for our services and have never been eligible for our services previously in their lives. They're working individuals who, and our income limits are low. The maximum income limit that somebody can have and still qualify for legal aid services is 200% of federal poverty level. So we're finding that there are a significant section of the population who, for the first time ever, are eligible for our legal services for that. And we need to address their needs and look at the assistance that they need. And again, not just rental assistance, to be able to move forward and continue to contribute to the community, because they are our workforce.
Thank you so much. Jennifer, do you want to comment on any of the last part of the conversation?
Yes, Ashley made a great point about NIMBYism and welcoming affordable housing units into all parts of our city. And it's just a reminder that there are policies that can have real life implications for how these play out. So previously we had a policy that local governments had to follow of affirmatively furthering fair housing. That's one of the ways that we measure whether we do have a development and approval process that allows all these communities to welcome affordable housing. That in this administration is something that has been removed. Another concern that I have is the way that we make these ideals about removing systemic segregation from housing is we have fair housing laws and they are enforced. And I don't know if Chair Thomas has a minute to chime in here, but it's my understanding that the City of Dallas Fair Housing Office will be closed due to funding cuts. And so that's a place where we have laws that we enforce to try to further these policy goals, and we may not have the resources to do them as a result of the pandemic.
Councilmember Thomas, would you comment on that?
Well, as far as the Office for Our Housing, my understanding is they're still there. Matter of fact, that's something that's changing as well. It's going to be combined within another office. So a lot of things are fluid right now because we're going through the budget process, because we've had to furlough employees. I would, our director, she's retiring, Beverly Davis, who's done a stellar job as heading up our Office of for Our Housing. And so as we, transition from her to someone else, that office will be combined with other offices that are going to fall under this Office of Equity and Inclusion. I believe that's what city manager is proposing. However, our Office of our Department of Housing and employees that work within the Department of Housing will still be available to assist and address any concerns as relates to housing as we go through this transition.
Councilmember Thomas, is there anything that the cities are going to do, a petition to the state for the next legislative session, any laws that the cities need or would like to have changed so that local presence can be more effective?
Oh, interesting timing. The mayor himself chairs our Legislative Affairs Ad Hoc Committee. He just called a committee meeting. I'm not on that committee, but any council member can attend that meeting. And so these priorities will be, identified by that committee, presented to the council as a whole. And so, housing, addressing housing is always a priority from a legislative standpoint at the city level, at the state level. And so we want to make sure that, once again, it's not just us, but we're encouraging other cities to also advocate for changes at the legislative level that are going to be beneficial. I think one of the benefits to having a mayor who was a former state legislator is the relationships that he has with the governor and others at the state level. And so hopefully we'll be able to utilize that to our advantage as they go into the upcoming legislative session.
Thank you. Ashley, would you comment a little bit about the United Way's role in advocacy and how citizens might be able to jump in here and help a bit on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think right now we're looking more immediately and at the federal level. So we know that recent data suggests in Texas that there's up to 4 million people that are at risk of evictions. And so prioritizing advocating for the HEROES Act and for the 3 points that are in the HEROES Act that I think are really critical to affordable housing and keeping people housed right now. Right now, the Act includes $11.5 million in emergency solutions grants to help target assistance towards homeless individuals and keeping them off the streets and minimizing any kind of impact from COVID. We need a 12-month national uniform moratorium on evictions and foreclosures to protect renters and landlords. And then $100 billion needs to be allocated in emergency rental assistance and eviction prevention to help renters pay back the rent that they owe, and to, again, provide that stability and security for property owners and renters alike. And so we'll be advocating on that. We're keeping an eye on building our, just kind of like Chair Thomas mentioned, building our legislative agenda for the state right now. But affordable housing is key. And how do we impact any changes that need to happen at the state and local level will be on the top of our list for sure.
Thank you. Councilmember Thomas, I know you have to leave in just a few minutes. Is there any closing remarks you would like to make or any additional comments that you would like to make?
Sure. Well, once again, Tony, thank you for this important conversation. Thank you for this expert group of panelists. I feel like I was, in class, and I had an opportunity to learn from those who are dealing with this on the ground on a day-to-day basis. The one thing I would encourage each of us to do is to continue to have the conversations. Let's all come together. Let's bring, like we're together now, let's come together and let's look at some effective strategies. Let's see how it affects the decisions that we make affect everyone else. Lucy, who's just been, a jewel and a master at this, made some excellent points in terms of being able to walk a mile in her shoes, even though my feet would probably hurt. But being able to walk a mile in her shoes from the standpoint of seeing how decisions we make impact those who are doing developments, especially multifamily, and the decisions that we make affect those who are advocates for affordable or workforce housing. Just being able to get everyone around the table and being able to lay out some recommendations and suggestions from a local standpoint, but then being able to look at from a regional standpoint, how we can also collectively come up with a regional strategy to address affordable or workforce housing that's going to benefit everyone. Someone talked about NIMBYism. That's a real challenge, but I think a lot is based on perception and not necessarily reality. There's been a lot of opposition in the past to affordable developments, but once you get a chance to know the people as opposed to that person over there and see who the person is, know their story, understand their challenges, and be empathetic. And that's the key word, be empathetic, and say, except for, fate, or if you're a person of faith, God, there could have been I. Being able to look at a situation from that standpoint, understand what a person's been through, the fact that you could have gone through that same thing, allows us to better understand the challenges that each other faces and help us to realize that we're more alike than we are different. So thank you, Tony, and I look forward to the opportunity to come back and share with you again in the future.
Can I jump in before you get to escape? Also, what the business community needs and wants is your leadership. We need the city to convene us together. So we're not just responding to the marketplace. We're not just responding to your rules. We want to respond to your vision and to your aspirations. And if we're all there in the room together, and obviously with other people on this panel too, then we might be able to rise up and do something better. So now go back to your meeting, but don't forget you got to lead us.
Hey, I don't have a problem leading. That comes easy for me. So look forward to us coming together again. I'm accepting the challenge, and very soon, once we get through this budgeting process, let's do it. Let's make it happen. Thanks, Lucy. I'll be in touch very soon.
Councilmember Thomas, I realized that, you know, I grew up with four sisters, so I didn't think anything of the configuration of this panel. You handled it very well. Nice job, man, and keep working for us. We appreciate your leadership. We appreciate the service, and we appreciate your willingness to be held accountable to these issues on behalf of our citizens. Thanks so much for showing up today.
Thank you. Thanks for the input. Have a great day, everyone.
Take care. Jennifer, any other responses that you'd like to make before we do our closing round?
Sure. One thing that I think came out of this conversation is that right now there's a lot of uncertainty. So as Ashley and Marianne talked about, the CARES Act moratorium only covered a percentage of renters, and it's expired. Cities and counties offered more ad hoc and short-term protections, and those may or may not have been thrown into doubt by the AG's opinion that said some of those measures may have exceeded local government's emergency powers. So we're in a position right now where we really need, as Ashley pointed out, the help for our fellow citizens. Rental assistance, unemployment assistance, and the business community needs clarity. And this patchwork of conflicting requirements is very difficult to navigate in. So Ashley's right. I think we do need to advocate for some robust relief and to make sure that that gets deployed in our communities the way that we want it to be.
Marianne, how about you? Any last comments or observations that you'd like our audience to know or get engaged in from your perspective? You're still on mute, Marianne.
I'm sorry, forgive me. I would echo the sentiments of that Ashley made previously with regard, and I've already mentioned it. The biggest impact that we're seeing we're having clients qualify for our services that just wouldn't have before. And that is showing us what a significant economic impact that the pandemic has had on our region. And we need to work together for the solutions. And work with landlords. Like Lucy said, she noted that she'd worked with a number of tenants, and we're seeing that landlords are more receptive to working with us, but it's engaging in that conversation and moving forward and recognizing that we're all in this together.
Thank you. Ashley, any recommendations for our audience? Any last minute thoughts about how our audience can get engaged in providing some solution to this issue?
I think get out there and advocate. You know, we need to pass some of these bills through the Senate. The HEROES Act is sitting there right now. And so how can we push that through so that we can get assistance out to our communities and to the property owners to help stabilize our community? The only other thing too we didn't really talk about was an eviction diversion plan. So if we can have across our region a plan to provide financial assistance, legal assistance, and expungement of eviction proceedings so that we don't harm people moving forward, that is something else that I think that we need to advocate and try and replicate here. It's some good work that's happening in other cities.
Thank you, Ashley.
Mm-hmm.
Lucy, you know, my hat off to you for holding a public official accountable to do the convening. A couple of times we have heard on this panel, if we did this, if we did this, if we did this, but we have to have somebody leading that charge, right? And so you laid that at the city's feet. And is that you really believe that that is the solution, that the city convenes these conversations and brings in a wide group of folks and together there can be some solutions? Or do you think that the convener should be the United Way or Social Venture Partners or some other organization? Who is the convener to bring the various groups together?
Maybe the answer is whoever we will follow, whoever can bring us to actually be bold and take an action, whoever will get us to do the things that we know we should have done, but for some reason I had an obstacle or I just had a different priority. You know, I'm 66, I've been here my whole life, and so many of the issues of which we speak have been here my whole life. Why haven't we been bold enough to solve it? Was it so painful that we couldn't do it? Was it so unimportant that we ignored it? Are we so self-obsessed? Of course, I'm self-obsessed. But I'm also, powerfully committed. I also know that I want to have a life of purpose. And I also know that the gifts I have been given from this community, I've never given back in full, right? I can just lead my life the best way I can. So I am tired of not being bold. I'm tired of hearing about the problems of South Dallas not reaching its potential. And I don't have the answers, but I'm a part of the answer. And if I run out and try to do it myself, it won't work. I mean, for a lot of reasons. I have to be a part of the community. And I think the leadership comes from all areas together. It obviously can come from a group like Social Venture Partners. Obviously it can come from the United Way. It obviously can come from a group of people in the business community. In real estate, there's groups forming together to try to be responsive. It cannot happen without the city's real leadership as a part of it and buying in. Bits and pieces can happen. And it's more than a city, you could say regional. So I appreciate you giving me that soapbox because I know a whole lot of us care. And it's nice to be bold. So this moment gives us that opportunity.
Lucy, I have a feeling that any one of us would follow you anywhere that you suggested that we go. So anytime you're ready to convene the gathering, you will have a large audience of followers. Lucy, in preparation for this session, I saw an interview with you maybe 10 years ago or so, and you were kind of put on the spot, and the question was, what motto do you have for your life? And your response was, one of them was, ride into life with love. And I was so struck by that, ride into life with love. And, I just think that when we think about that word love for our audience, it is not a feeling that you were talking about. It is an action. And there are many actions that we can take. The problem for most of us is that we don't know exactly where to start. So I thank you for all the many actions of love that you have shown to our city. To our entire panel, thank you for all of that you are doing. But when people do want to plug in, I just want to speak to our audience heart to heart. Reach out to Social Venture Partners, reach out to the United Way. We can help you get plugged in so that you can ride into life with love. I appreciate this panel so much, appreciate all of your efforts. Thank you to each of you, and we will see you at the next digital gathering. Take care.